I'm now going to talk a little bit about my paper with Professor Desange. Um, Before we get into the paper, though, or I should say, by way of getting into the paper, we're going to flesh out Putnam's view of the semantics or meaning of natural kind terms a little more clearly. So remember, Putnam says that when you use the term water, you're referring to what you're in causal contact with, or I should say that, and I'll say this, that being in causal contact with something is what allows you to refer to it, rather than being able to refer to it because you hold a description in your head that matches the thing in the world. It's the causal relation itself that makes the difference. I should mention that Putnam's theory is often called an externalist semantic theory, whereas Fregean theories are often called internalist semantic theories. Why is that? Well, because if Frege is right, then what allows you to refer to, say, water is a description that you hold in your head or that you access a priori, if it's a Fregean sense. Either way, you can think of the description as broadly internal to you. It's internal in that it's either literally part of your mind, the description is, or it's something you can access just by closing your eyes and thinking about it. Whereas on Putnam's view, it's just the existence of a causal relation between you and the thing in the world, and that causal relation is wholly outside you. So it's the causal relation on Putnam's view that fixes the meaning of your term. So in some sense, the meaning of your term isn't fixed by what's in your head. And that's why his view is sometimes called externalist. But notice this. When I refer to water, I'm in causal contact with both something like the description that you would associate with the Fregean sense, the superficial properties being clear and being liquid and so on, and I'm in causal contact with the underlying kind, H2O, the thing you can't sort of superficially see but is out there no less than liquidity is out there. Now, Putnam claims that water refers to H2O and not to the superficial properties. One way to think about what that means is this. If we think about some counterfactual world, a world that's different than ours, and say in our world, the stuff we've been calling water, or samples of the stuff we've been calling water, most of those samples, are in fact samples of H2O. But in that other possible world, the stuff that has the superficial properties by which we ordinarily recognize water as water isn't made of H2O. Our word water, according to Putnam, wouldn't refer to that stuff, even though it was watery, even though it was liquid and so on, because it has a different underlying structure, and our word water is referring to the underlying structure, not to the superficial properties. Now, why does Putnam get to say that our word water refers to H2O rather than the superficial properties? Well, he thinks that when we introduce and use the word water, we're intending to refer to a hidden structure. So it has something to do with our mental state, what we intend to refer to when we introduce and use the word water. Where a hidden structure, what we're trying to refer to, is an underlying feature of the thing that unifies various samples of it. That is, that makes them all count as samples of the same kind of thing. So we've called stuff in lakes and stuff that falls from skies and stuff that comes from faucets and so on water. Why does the word water apply to each of those things despite various variations in their superficial features? Is it because there are some unifying superficial features and that's what makes them all count as samples of water? No, says Putnam. It's rather because we expect there to be an underlying structure that's common to all of them, a kind of essence. And we expect that essence, what makes something the essence? Well, here's a puzzle. Well, I guess let me first say this. What makes something the essence is roughly that it explains the superficial properties. That is, it's responsible for the thing superficially at least appearing to us a certain way. Okay. Now here's a puzzle. If it had turned out that there is no hidden structure for water, that is, the stuff the word water the stuff we've been pointing at when we say the word water, the sample in the lake and the sample coming from my faucet. If there was no hidden structure, that is, there's no common underlying structure that explains the superficial characteristics that stuff has, would that mean that there is no water? Just like if there's no winged horse, it means there is no Pegasus. And correspondingly, does that mean the word water doesn't refer to anything, just like the word Pegasus doesn't refer to anything? Well, surely that's wrong. And if your theory of meaning has that consequence, then your theory of meaning is bad. Why? Well, look, just suppose tomorrow scientists announce, look, it turns out what we thought was a true theory, chemistry, it's all bullshit. It's all just deeply misguided. We were mistaken, we were wrong. And when we analyze things more carefully, there's really nothing similar across various samples of water that makes them all count as the same kind of thing, except for the superficial properties that they happen to share. Okay, so there's no hidden structure. Well, you might think the following holds. If Putnam is right, then water refers to the hidden structure, whatever it is. Now, on this hypothesis, there is no hidden structure, so it follows that if Putnam is right, then it turns out that there is no water. Well, that seems like a bad consequence. And the question is, how could we preserve reference to water even on the hypothesis that there is no hidden structure if what we intend to refer to when we use the word water is the hidden structure? And here's the answer. The answer appeals to a complex intention, and this answer comes from Putnam himself. So here's what he says. Our intention, that is what we intend to refer to, is such that we refer to a hidden structure if there is one, but otherwise we refer to whatever the best candidate referent is. So the idea is we have a very complex intention. And correspondingly, the sense of water, what Putnam calls its intention with an S. So an intention with a T is like what I intend. An intention with an S is kind of like the sense of a term. It's like the meaning of a term. It's a word Carnap uses. He contrasts intention with an S from extension, where the extension of a predicate, say the word water, is all the water in our world, and the intention of the word water is sort of what you might think of as kind of like the sense. It's what's fixing the referent of the term water. So here's how Putnam thinks the intention with an S for the term water works. This is going to apparently appear out of order, but I'll just start with the top here. It includes all of the following. If enough samples that we have called water have one hidden structure, and few enough samples that we have refused to call water have that same structure, then in all worlds, the word water refers to whatever and only whatever has that structure. So here's the basic idea. If when we use water, we're typically kind of pointing at and in contact with stuff that shares a certain hidden structure, then the word water just refers to whatever and only whatever has that structure, both here and in all worlds. Otherwise, that is, if there isn't a single hidden structure, if enough samples that we have called water have one of two hidden structures, so some of the lakes I've pointed at, it's been H2O, other of the lakes I've pointed at, it's been some other chemical structure. And enough samples of each have that structure, and few enough samples that we've refused to call as water have those structures, then in all worlds, water refers to whatever and only whatever has one of those two structures. So the idea here is we're kind of like secret essentialists. That's why you get conditional W1 up there, because we want there to be an essence, and we want to be talking about an essence that's shared by all samples of water. But we're kind of like fickle essentialists, because we're willing to say, look, if there's two essences, that's good enough. And if there's two underlying structures, that's good enough. We can say there are two essences, surprisingly. And maybe there can be three, and maybe there can be four, and so on and so forth. But if it gets too unruly, if there's just too many different underlying structures, then you don't get any explanatory kick anymore by pointing to a hidden structure. Then, if there's too many hidden structures, you can't say like, well, the stuff from the lake probably boils at 100 degrees Celsius for the same reason as the stuff from my faucet does. If they're two different chemical structures, it's going to be two different reasons they boil at that temperature. So when things get too unruly, then what you're going to want to say is not that water doesn't refer at all, but rather that what fixes the reference turns out to be the superficial properties. So Putnam thinks that all of these conditionals together comprise the single sense of water. It's a complex intention with an S. So this solves the puzzle that we introduced earlier. Remember, the puzzle was this. It looks like if Putnam is right, that we intend to refer to a hidden structure, and that because of that, a causal relation between that hidden structure and us fixes the reference of water. If it turned out that there were no hidden structure, it would turn out that there wasn't any water, even if there's this stuff in lakes and rivers and falling from the sky and so on and so forth. And that just seems wrong, so it seems like Putnam's view must be wrong. But in fact, we can see now this complex intention solves the problem. Even if W1, W2, and so on turn out to be false, there can still be water. Why? Because if those are false, then the meaning of water dictates the word water refers to whatever and only whatever is watery. Okay, that all in effect is, I'm including that in our paper, but that is under Roman numeral 3 here, Biggs and Desange. But really, that's all just part of Putnam's theory. So I'm going to stop this presentation there, and we'll continue next time with the same slideshow by talking about the lessons that Professor Desange and I draw from this.